Hey guys, so in this module of the free email marketing course that I'm putting on my YouTube channel, I'm going to be teaching you guys exactly how to fix your deliverability. So if you're a brand watching this, it probably means your open rates are not where you want it to be. In this video, I'm going to show you guys exactly how to fix that. So I'm just going to jump into this presentation that I've made real quick about fixing deliverability. I've done about, I think, 2 or 3 videos on this in the past, but this video specifically, I'm just going to show you the simplest method and the principle around fixing deliverability instead of giving you like the higher level stuff we do that is more efficient, but it's kind of complex. There's like decisions that you have to make and that kind of stuff. Whereas this tutorial is literally for the brand owner that is doing under 150K a month in revenue, and it'll show you guys how to do it yourself essentially, because working with an agency like ours might be a bit expensive for you, right? So let's dive into it. So essentially, just to reiterate the importance of higher open rates, basically you get more views on your email content, which means more clicks, more conversions, more dollars for you, right? So in terms of the solution to actually solve for sender reputation or deliverability, it just comes down to these 4 simple steps, right? You basically want to reduce your sending segments to like a super duper highly engaged segment. And then once you see an increase in metrics, you want to expand to a slightly more broader segment. And then if you see an increase in open rates after that, then you're going to broaden out to a highly engaged segment instead of a super highly engaged segment. And then after that, you're just going to return to your regular engaged segments. Now, if you go on YouTube or just search around on Google, they kind of have different methodologies, but the principle always boils down to just sending to a really targeted, hyper engaged list, slightly less engaged list, slightly less engaged list, and then back to your normal sending, right? So on Klaviyo's community tutorials, you'll see that they have something along the lines of this, where they teach you how to do the segments in this way. Whereas if you go on YouTube, there's like literally dozens and dozens of deliverability videos, and they all boil down to the same concept, right? Which is pretty much just tighten your sending segments and slowly expand out. There's so many ways to do this, but that's the principle it boils down to. So in this tutorial, I'm just going to demo you the simplest way Klaviyo asks you to do this. And I'll show you a couple other variations just so that you're aware of them. But it's going to take literally like 5 minutes, so stick around for this. So I'm just going to jump into a Klaviyo account right now and show you guys exactly how to construct the segments. So once you guys are inside of Klaviyo, right, you're going to go to your listen segments and you're going to hit create a segment, and you're going to name this something along the lines of like plethora, super duper engaged, whatever you really want to call it. It's mainly like, you can call it like warm up segment 1 or something like that, right? And I'm going to show you segment 1, 2, and 3 all the way until completion. So the first segment is basically just what someone has or has not done, opened email at least once. There's kind of 2 ways to approach this. Klaviyo's way is based on how many times they've actually opened and then dialing it down from there. And then the more traditional way is based on how recent they've engaged, right? But again, it boils down to you have a big list, you start off with like the really engaged part, and then you expand outwards, right? So Klaviyo's way of doing this is you start off by saying is at least 5 times in, let's say, the last 60 days. It just depends on how many you typically send. But let's say you set it at 5 in the last 60 days, right? And that's basically the segment. Now, other variations of this would be something like at least once in the last 14 days. And then once you see a 40% or more open rate on this segment, then you jump into warm-up segment 2, which is going to be at least once in the last 30 days, and then last 45 days for warm-up segment 3, right? And you see how it's kind of like slowly broadening it out. And generally you want to get at least 3 emails that have 40% or higher open rates within that specific segment before you move on to the second segment. And then essentially you just want to broaden it out until you reach like 90 days engaged, in which case like your sending reputation is basically repaired. That's one way. The Klaviyo's way is basically starting off with is at least 5 in the last 60 days, right, for warm-up segment 1. And then once you get 40% or more for 3 campaigns in a row, then you want to dial this down to 4, and then you want to dial it down to 3, dial it down to 2, dial it down to 1 for each segment, right? And that's literally it. Now, it's super important that while you're doing this, you turn off some of your flows like your customer win back, your sunset unengaged, your cross-sell flows, review flows, your abandoned products, abandoned clicks, abandoned sites. All of these flows should be turned off because they're like lower engaged flows, right? While you're sending these campaigns. And that's literally it. This entire process should last anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks, depending on how bad your deliverability is. So for example, if your open rate right now is, let's say on average 15% or less, it's gonna be more like an 8-week process to fix this. If your deliverability is more like 25 to 30%, it will probably take around like 4 weeks to fix this. But essentially, it just depends on how bad your sender reputation already is. And that's principally how to fix it. You want to start off by sending to a really engaged list and slowly broaden out. Now, let's talk about some longer term solutions to fixing your deliverability in a more permanent way, right? Because if you do this, you get the deliverability to where it needs to be, but your email content persists to be kind of sucky, right? Then the issue with that is, you know, you're gonna end up in the same position, because the reason why your sender reputation went down is because your content is not very engaging. People don't really like reading it, people don't like seeing it, either that or you're sending way too often to an unengaged list. So to maintain deliverability from a long-term trajectory, you want to only ever send campaigns to your engaged segment. So let's say that would be open email at least once in the last 90 days, right? And then maybe once or twice a month you can send to a much wider list. Let's say once a month you send to your whole list. That's completely fine to re-engage some of the subscribers. The second thing that you want to improve on is the actual content you are producing and sending to your list itself. So an example of this would be something along the lines that you guys see on screen. The left is the before, the right is the after. You can see the differences in content, right? Like the content on the left doesn't look nearly as good as the content on the right. And that's basically a sample that I did for a brand that's looking to onboard with us literally 2 days ago. And just by doing this, we doubled the average revenue per campaign. But also there's some stuff that we do on the like code side of the emails that also help prevent it from going into the promotions tab and that kind of stuff. But essentially, you kind of get the idea, right? If your content sucks long term, you're gonna end up in the same exact position again, which is why, like, you know, if you're a brand of decent size, let's say 150K-ish or more per month, then it probably makes sense for you to book in a call with me and then just see if we can kind of like help take over your email marketing systems, right? So long-term prevention is basically only sending to engaged segments and making consistent improvements to the content side of your campaigns also. I hope you guys found this tutorial useful, and I'll see you in the next module.